Hey, horror fans, welcome back to Jay vs. Horror, and today we're going to be counting down our top 10 horror films of 2003. Guys, this is our third step on our way to naming the top 10 films of the last 20 years. Let's get started. At number 10, I have Dead End. Dead End stars Ray Wise and Lynn Shay. It's a fun movie. At times, I think it borders on, dark comedy, but it does some things here that other films try to replicate later on, and they just don't do as well. Uh, a family is on the way to grandma's house, I guess you would say, for Christmas, and they take the scenic route, and boy, do they ever. They get lost on this endless road that seems to never uh, go where they think it's going to. They think, if we head this way long enough, we'll reach the ocean. If we go this way longer, there must be a military base around here. But none of that seems to matter. It gives itself away, I guess, and you kind of know where all this is headed. And I would say that, at the end, it's a little bit interesting to see how all these things got pieced together. It kind of reminds you of the Wizard of Oz ending to an extent, right? So that's Dead End from 2003 at number 10. Uh, at number 9, I have House of a Thousand Corpses, and a lot of people are either going to have this completely off their list or it's going to be number 1. That's the way it goes with Rob Zombie films. People either hate him or love him. He's very polarizing. This first film of his is kind of an interesting debut. I'll say that. It's not a great film, in my opinion. He didn't do a great job steering the ship on this. The editing is a little choppy and stuff like that, but it is kind of interesting to see where his tastes lie. And this being his first movie, you didn't really know where he was going to go with stuff. And I think it's a little convoluted, especially towards the end. There's just too many elements in the film. I think that's why when we see The Devil's Rejects and then later on Three from Hell, those films are a little more streamlined and they're just about the Firefly family. They're not. They don't have all these other, supernatural elements of Doctor Satan and all this other stuff. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Rob Zombie. I'm not a huge fan of this film, but I felt like it deserved a spot in the top 10. So I put it at number 9, House of a Thousand Corpses. At number 8, I have Final Destination Part 2. And guys, this is a year full of remakes and sequels, so it was hard not to go with some of the sequels and remakes. Uh, and Final Destination 2 is one of my favorite sequels, to be honest with you. There's some great scenes in Final Destination 2. There's some great scenes in all the Final Destinations. I think when you get back to like 4 and 5, they really start to fall off a little bit, but the first 3 have some great scenes in them. And, ever since Final Destination 2 came out, everyone and their brother has been afraid of log trucks in traffic, right? We're also afraid of airbags. And I love the ending of Final Destination 2, how they try to throw some quick comedy in there, really dark comedy at the end. It kind of seems like it comes out of nowhere. There's hints of comedy in the film. It's not an atmosphere of comedy, but the characters say funny things and do funny things because that's part of their character, right? But then at the end, we get this weird, Peter Jackson scene that you wouldn't expect in this movie. But yeah, I really enjoy Final Destination 2, and even though it's a sequel, I felt it deserved a spot here, so we have it at number 8. At number 7, I have Freddy versus Jason. Why not, right? I don't hate Freddy versus Jason. It's not my favorite Freddy film. It's not my favorite Jason film. But I thought it was pretty decent for that era, and directed by Ronnie Yu, who did Bride of Chucky previously and had some comic sense to him. There's some funny lines in the movie. There's also some great kills in the movie from both Freddy and Jason. And then, of course, the fight at the end. But, the thing about these versus movies, all of them, Predator versus Alien, Freddy versus Jason, any that they make in the future, is that you have two properties that are valued, and they're not going to have one of them actually come out ahead of the other. There's always going to be some kind of a tie. And the other thing I don't really like about versus movies is how they always try to make one of the two characters the anti-hero. In Predator versus Alien, of course, it's Predator becomes the anti-hero, and here we have Jason. They have to pick one of the characters for the human audience to relate to, right? We have to be able to relate to one of these guys, and one of these guys has to be the protagonist in some sense, or it's just a like a YouTube video of two guys in a costume fighting, right? I like Freddy versus Jason. It made a lot of money when it came out, and this is actually the last time we got to see Robert Englund play Freddy. So I mean, unless you count the Goldbergs or any other time he showed up as Freddy. Uh, but yeah, on screen, I mean, in a feature film, this is the last time we got to see Robert Englund play Freddy Krueger. Uh, and I think it's just a fun movie. It's kind of a kid movie in a way where it's a little silly, but it's a fun movie. So that's Freddy vs. Jason at number 7. We are moving on. At number 6, I struggled with this one. I struggled with this one a lot because if it was up to me, this movie wouldn't even be on any list. But I had to be objective about it to an extent. So I put Haute Tension, Switchblade Romance, High Tension, whatever you want to call it. Alexandra Aja's first, real big movie, the one that got him noticed. And man, I'm torn on this one personally. I just, when I started watching the movie, the first time I started watching it, I had read Intensity probably 2 or 3 years before this. And watching the film, it hit me about, 20 minutes in. I'm like, oh my God, this is Dean Koontz's Intensity. And I saw it pretty much right after it came out. So, yeah, it hit me about, maybe 20 minutes into the film where it was just like, this is pretty much, they're going scene for scene, if you can do that with a book. And they stole everything from that book. They stole everything from it until the very end. The last, 20 minutes of the movie, they switched and changed it into something different, which in my opinion was a bad idea. If you're going to rip somebody off, you might as well rip off the ending too, because the ending in the book is 100 times better than the ending in the movie. In my opinion, Aja just ripped off Dean Koontz's book. He even admitted it, by the way. He didn't say he ripped him off. He said, yeah, I remember reading that book and maybe it inspired me. But yeah, he got to the end of the movie and then he just took the same old ending that we've seen since 1960, since Psycho came out, and slapped it on the end. And it doesn't even make sense. It creates these giant plot holes in the film. But I will admit, Aja does have an excellent eye behind the camera. He does understand film visually, and he is a great director visually. I don't think he has a creative bone in his body when it comes to writing or figuring anything out for himself. Because, after this, he totally rips off Dean Koontz here. And Dean Koontz laughed it off and said, I don't care. I don't want my novel associated with his shitty movie by suing him. So that was kind of Dean's way of gut punching him for doing this without suing him. And Dean's not afraid to sue people. He's done it several times over movies that were related to his books. But, I think, and then later on you see Aja, most of his films are like, the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, remake of The Eye, things that have been done before, concepts you've seen before, and things like that. But I do believe that Aja is a great director visually. I just think that, if you're going to do a project with him, don't let him write it, because it will really just be somebody else writing it anyway. So, yeah, we're moving on from Haute Tension. I do want to mention there with Haute Tension that another reason why that film does work is because Aja was smart enough to go out and get Lucio Fulci's old effects guy. And so that's why those practical effects really pop in Haute Tension. But moving on. At number 5, I have one of my personal favorites. I don't know if it's going to be everybody's favorite. Some people will even argue with me that this isn't a horror movie. They won't argue with me because I'm not going to argue about it. But at number 5, I have Identity. And it's an all-star cast, guys. John Cusack, Rebecca De Mornay, Ray Liotta, on and on and on. And it's basically a twist on the Agatha Christie whodunit. Everyone's trapped at a motel in the middle of the night. Nobody can get out. And people start getting picked off one by one. Now, what I did think is different about this movie, not just the fact that the mystery is done very well, in my opinion, and the characters are set up very well, is the fact that the way it turns about halfway through and lets us know what's going on. I'd say about 2/3 of the way through. It doesn't hold that twist to the end, which I think is smart, because then that allows them to set up a secondary twist at the end, right? And so I like how they expose what's actually going on here because we're not stupid. They don't treat us like we're stupid the whole time. I mean, I think about, 30 or 40 minutes into the film, you know something's not right. You understand, you realize that this is not a normal situation that occurs in real life. And so then it is explained to us, okay, you can stop picking the movie apart and you can go with it because this is, I don't want to give it away because this is a huge twist in the movie that comes about 2/3 of the way through. And then, like I said, there's like a secondary twist at the end that kind of puts a cherry on top of the film. Great whodunit. One of my favorite films of this era, Identity. Moving on. At number 4, I have an animal attack film that I think is very well done. It's called Open Water, and it's a film that nobody really talks about. They talk about Jaws, and every now and then I'll see somebody talk about Backcountry, which to me is absolutely terrifying. And guys, you may have heard me say this before, but at my age, I'm not really scared of ghosts. I don't believe that Freddy Krueger's coming to get me. I don't think that Jason Voorhees is in the woods. Past all that stuff as far as being scared, right? Now, people will say, well, maybe, as an adult, you should be scared of serial killer movies. Well, there aren't a whole lot of serial killers that are out there looking for a slightly overweight 40-year-old guy with brown hair and brown eyes. It's just, I don't fit a lot of descriptions for what people are looking for when they go out in the ice cream truck, right? So that doesn't really terrify me either. But the one thing in my life that I think should terrify people at my age are animal attack movies because these are real. This could happen to you. You could die like this. People get consumed with the fact that they're, I'm an accountant, I'm a singer, this is who I am, this is my identity, this is, my personality. All those things, consume their mind and they forget that they are animals and that there are places in this world, the one that we live in, where you can still become food for another animal. And so movies like Backcountry and Jaws, I think those are the films that actually terrify me because in faced in that situation, you fight till you die, and it's more likely that you're going to die. Open Water is a very dramatic animal attack film. It's about two people who go scuba diving for the first time. There's a couple jackasses on the boat who get in trouble, and then they're told that they're not allowed to go diving. But when everybody goes in the water, the instructor goes in with them, and so these guys grab tanks and go in too. Now, this causes a problem because when everyone comes back out, we have the couple that the film starts off with, that they are still in the water. But the guy does a head count, and because he, miscounted with these other two guys coming back out of the water that weren't supposed to be in the water, they are forgotten, and they go off and leave these people in the middle of the ocean for days. Nobody realizes that they're missing. And so they're just floating in the middle of the ocean, and a swarm of sharks. It's not one shark. Like in Jaws, it's not like a giant shark movie or anything like that. It's just a bunch of sharks find them and start eating them a little bit at a time. And that has to be terrifying for something that you can't see to come up and take a huge bite out of you and swim off, and you're bleeding then in the water, and they're just feasting on you. This is based on a true story too, so it's very impactful in my opinion. It's not super scary. There's no moments where you're gonna be like scream or jump or anything like that in that sense, but it's scary in a psychological sense when you have to think about being trapped with the person that you love the most and knowing you're both going to be eaten alive, and there's literally nothing you can do about it but hold each other. So yeah, I think Open Water is a great film that's very underrated. They made a bunch of sequels. Forget about those. I think the second one was all right. The second one, they're a bunch of idiots. They're on a boat out in the middle of the ocean, and they jump off the boat to go swimming and realize they didn't put the ladder down to get back on the boat, and they're all trapped in the ocean and they get eaten by sharks. I don't think that's a bad movie, but that whole concept of like they were so stupid that like 5 of them jumped in the water and didn't put the ladder down. That just always got me. And then 3, of course, who cares after 2? But yeah, Open Water at number 4. At number 3, I have a Asian film, A Tale of Two Sisters, and this is a great supernatural horror film. Got remade later on. I mean, there was that huge craze here in the United States of remaking Asian horror films, and A Tale of Two Sisters got remade, and it was called The Uninvited here. It was changed to a point where it was kind of, less, I won't say it was unrecognizable, but it wasn't good. I'll say that. Uh, it didn't get any love from anybody, and they had Elizabeth Banks in it. They tried to put a couple stars in there, but yeah, this film is from South Korea, and it's directed by Kim Ji-woon, and it's just a great story about two sisters and the stepmother that comes to live there, kind of like a I will say she's an evil stepmother, but nobody's getting along, and these two sisters are kind of having it out with her. There's a big twist to this movie that I'm not going to give away. I will just tell you that if you love Asian horror films and you haven't seen this one, go check it out. It's one of the more underrated ones. Everyone always talks about Juon. Everyone always talks about Ringu and the Eye. Maybe the Eye. I talk about the Eye a lot. But I don't. A lot of people don't talk about A Tale of Two Sisters, and it's a great supernatural horror film from South Korea. So make sure you check that out at number 3. At number 2, I'm gonna get skinned alive for this, and that's not any kind of a pun or a joke or anything. But a lot of people are gonna be upset about this one. But I have reasons. So hold on. At number 2, I have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. That's right. Uh, Jessica Biel does a great job in this movie. I mean, she's a great actress anyway. She did a lot of stuff around this era. We even saw her in like Blade 3 and other stuff, but she kind of fell off after this, and we haven't seen her in a while. The last thing I think I saw her in was the Tall Man. But anyway, this film, I liked it a lot. I thought it was a good remake. It's very sharp. It's visually very bright and interesting. It in no way does it have the same cinematography as the first film, other than the few times where they try to, recapture that. They'll do those shots from the ground, those wide shots from the ground up, and they, but as far as having its own style, it does have its own style a little bit too. It's a slick remake. It's pretty, it's bright, it's all those things, and of course, Arlie Emery is in this. Does a great job. Now, the reason why I have it on here is because I think this movie means a lot to the younger generation. Uh, when I was married before, my stepkids, I came in one night from work and they were watching this on MTV because, of course, it was edited on MTV. But they loved it. I mean, this was like one of their favorite films, I found out. And so I tried to show them the 74 version. I'm like, oh, you guys got to watch the original. You got to watch the 1974 version. So I talked to their mom to ask her if it was okay first because I didn't want to show. I mean, they weren't, little. The oldest one was like 16 and the youngest one was 12. So I wanted to make sure it was okay with her, though. And there really isn't a whole lot of bad stuff in the original. It just seems like there is. It's kind of like that Hitchcock effect where he shows you very little, but you believe you've seen a whole lot. And so I showed them the 74 film, and halfway into that, they're bored to death. They don't care. There's just some things that don't connect with the younger audiences. And this film, it updated the story in a way that they did it really well. And, it captured the attention of the younger audience. And, there's a few, like even my little brother, I talked to him about this movie, and he says it's one of the movies that got him hooked on horror movies. As far as because I always watched him growing up, and he'd be like, he could take it or leave it. But, when he saw this one, he was like, oh, wow, I really want to start watching other horror films. I think it was also around that time when The Ring came out, because it came out in 2002, I believe. And so there was a few there that really got his attention, that got him watching. So, yeah, I think that the Texas Chainsaw remake is important to the younger generation of horror fans. I don't know who watches Joe Bob on Shudder, but if you watch Joe Bob on Shudder, you'll hear Darcy talk about the Texas Chainsaw remake quite a bit, and she will even tell you that it is the better film between the two. Between the original and the remake, she will tell you that the remake is the better film. And for most people, I think you would shrug that off and be like, yeah, okay, maybe you don't know what you're talking about. But with her, it's a little different because she's not just, another... she's not like the other male girls that Joe Bob has had in the past, okay? Some of the other male girls Joe Bob had in the past were just kind of like, their characters were supposed to be bimbos. I'm not saying the actual women were, but their characters were supposed to be these bimbos that were just hot and guys would write to. Darcy's like that too. She's super hot, But she's also got that. She's a super horror fan, man. She knows what she's talking about. I mean, this chick has been all over the world to horror festivals, conventions. She's met all the greatest people that we talk about meeting, or talk about on these channels, and that we've never met. So yeah, she knows what she's talking about. So it does lend a little bit more weight to it when she says it. But I still can't quite go to that level where I could say that the remake is better than the original. For one thing, you don't have the remake without the original. So just, I don't know if that's logic or not. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. There are remakes that are better than the original. But yeah, in this case, I have to stick with the 74 version. But this one was very good. I mean, I thought it was really good. Great gore. It's all put together very well. And yeah, at number 2, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. So you might be thinking right now, Jay, what could you possibly have at number 1 then? Well, at number 1, and I'll admit that this is probably a little bit subjective here, I have Wrong Turn. I love that movie. I really like the actors in this movie too. Eliza Dushku, Jeremy Sisto, and also even Desmond Harrington, who didn't do a whole lot after this, but I really liked him on Dexter and also in this movie. And I just thought this movie was done really well. I think it's shot really well. I love the scene where they are in the treehouse and or the guard tower, and the guys set fire to it. All that stuff, it works really well. It's very Hills Have Eyes. It's very Texas Chainsaw and all that, but at least it's an original film, and it does have its own kind of take on that. It will make you not want to go to West Virginia. I can say that for sure, right? And so, yeah, and it spawned a whole bunch of sequels. I think we're up to sequel number... I think they did, this, and then there's 5 sequels, and now Bill Van Vagel and I just interviewed Damian Maffei from The Strangers Pray at Night, and he was also in Haunt from 2019, and he is playing one of the main bad guys. And the remake, it's not a remake, it's a reboot of Wrong Turn. They're changing the story drastically from what I'm told. Damien, when we talked to him, I asked him about this reboot, and he even said, initially he was like, well, who said it was a reboot? And I said, well, Damien, that's all that's online about it, is that it is a reboot. And so then, I think it was about a week or 2 ago, I was checking out his Facebook profile, and I saw where he was talking, now calling it a reboot of Wrong Turn. So I'm interested to see that. But yeah, I think Wrong Turn is a strong movie. How can you complain? It spawned a whole franchise. We've got, 5 sequels and a reboot within 2 decades. So there you go, guys. That's my top 10 of 2003. Now let's go through some of the honorable mentions, some of the stuff I left out, and I'll try to talk a little bit about why maybe it got left out. Now, the first one that I'm going to talk about is Jeepers Creepers 2. I really like the film. I love the angle that they took with this one, where it goes straight into being a, kind of a slasher film now, with the kids trapped on the bus and all that. Ray Wise is in it. He's always good. But I just couldn't squeeze it into the top 10 with the other films I had. It's like I said, those last 2 spots, though, I would say even 3 of those last 3 spots, 8, 9, 10, you can make those. Those are very subjective. And you can slide some of these other films in and out of there, no problem. I'm a big fan of Beyond Reanimator. It's a terrible film, but I am going to mention it from director Brian Yuzna. It's a terrible film, but, I love that whole series. Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, and Beyond Reanimator finds us in a prison, similar to like Human Centipede Part 3. And it's not a great movie at all by any means, but I did enjoy it a lot. And I will say that I considered sliding it into that back spot at number 10. Another one that I thought about in that back spot at number 10 was Darkness Falls. I think there's been probably 4, 5, 6 movies about the Tooth Fairy. And this is probably the best one, in my opinion, as far as making the Tooth Fairy a, horrible thing or a creature, I really like Darkness Falls. I think, you go back and you look at this era, it's not a bad film at all, and you could easily slide it into that number 10 spot. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is Dreamcatcher, and, Dreamcatcher to me, you could go as high as maybe even number 6 with Dreamcatcher if you wanted to. It's definitely a quality film. It's just not a great Stephen King adaptation. and I think that's what hurt the film a lot. Lawrence Kasdan directed it. Of course, Morgan Freeman, Thomas Jane, and a bunch of other people in it. Jason Lee, Timothy Olyphant. Uh, so a great cast, good film. It's just, it's not a great adaptation of Stephen King's work. I think Morgan Freeman's eyebrows in the film sunk it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Morgan Freeman's eyebrows in Dreamcatcher. It makes him look like a ridiculous cartoon villain, and it kind of threw me off. Uh, Gozu from Takashi Miike. It's an interesting film. That's all I'm going to say about it. I don't know what you're supposed to get out of that movie other than it's super fucking weird. And it's also like a good gangster movie. There's some good, interesting gangster themes. Yakuza, as they call it. And this guy just goes completely nuts, one of the gangsters. Uh, he thinks that everything has been repurposed to kill Yakuza. The first thing that happens is he sees a dog outside and thinks that's been, trained to kill Yakuza. So he goes out there and there's this horrific scene. I actually covered my dog's eyes, Benny, while while it was going on, because I didn't want him to be traumatized by that. Where he just assaults this dog in a way that I cannot even explain. You have to see it for yourself. And the film goes on, it just gets weirder. The guy is nuts, and so the other mobsters want his buddy to take him out and kill him. But, it's somewhere along the line there, he disappears. The guy thinks he's killed him, but he actually hasn't. I don't know. Maybe he has. It's all weird. It's, it's Takashi Miike, and it's not one of his straight-up narrative films. It's a really weird one, but it's a good film. I think it's worth a watch. Gozu, and you can find that one on Tubi. Some of the other films. Somebody mentioned House of the Dead the other day from U Bowl. I find it hard to put any U Bowl film on any list anywhere. But I will appreciate this. I will say this. I appreciate U Bowl's tenacity. The guy does not quit. He's made probably 100 films or something by now. And every now and then, one of them is decent. I saw one recently a while back here, Rampage. I'd never watched it before because it had his name on it. And I watched it, and it was a decent film. It was worth a watch, I thought, Ju-On, The Grudge 2 was another film. Easily could go, as high as 6 or 5 on this list, depending on, a lot of people like this one better than the original. And I can't really go to that extent. I will say that it's not a bad film, and it's definitely better than the American remake. They really went nuts with that. Where, they had the J horror craze. They're going to remake all these Japanese horror films. But then when they start doing the sequels, they're remaking the sequels too, and you're like, it's not... something is getting lost in the translation at this point, right? Mimic 3, which was a straight-to-DVD film that had Lance Henriksen in it. It's not bad. None of those Mimic films are bad. And there's a Puppet Master movie, Puppet Master The Legacy. I didn't think it was very good, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who love that. A little film from Australia called Undead that I used to own on DVD. I thought was pretty decent. Now, the one that people are really going to get on me for here probably is Underworld. I don't like Underworld. I didn't like any of the Underworld, starting with the first one, because in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, Underworld was just like somebody saw The Matrix, and they're like, hey, let's take The Matrix, but we'll do it with vampires and werewolves. And that's how the whole movie came off to me, and there were several movies in this era that felt like they were trying to do, we're going to do The Matrix, but we're not going to do The Matrix. The one I think that did it the best was like Equilibrium with Christian Bale. Really loved that one. Christian Bale, Taye Diggs, Sean Bean. That was a great film that nobody ever talks about. But and it didn't have all the slow motion stuff in it, but it was a great action film. Underworld really takes it to that next level where it almost feels like they're completely copying The Matrix. The reasons why the people can do what they do are different, but the shots look exactly the same to me. Kate Beckinsale looks like somebody said, hey, let's make a movie where Trinity is the star instead of Neo. And so I was never a big Underworld fan, and I understand that Underworld, for a lot of people, they probably expected that's what I was going to put at number one, was Underworld. And then the only other one I think that I would talk about from 2003, maybe just to throw in there, is Willard, with Crispin Glover. It's a decent remake of an old film about a guy and his pets, and we'll leave it at that, guys. That's what we got for today. the top 10 horror films of 2003, completely subjective, guys. I tried to be a little objective. I tried to throw some of the stuff in there, like, man, that How Tension one was hard for me because I just despise that film for a lot for some pretty good reasons, in my opinion, I think. But I know a lot of people love it, and I went back and watched it again recently just to, acknowledge the good things about it. Even when you don't like something, you have to realize that there are fans of it, and you have to. It's a challenge. If you're really a critic, I'm not a critic, but if you're really somebody that loves movies, you have to be able to acknowledge the things that work in a film for other people and not just yourself. And that's what I do. Lots of times I can change my frame of mind and go into thinking of, like, if I was a fan of this type of movie, what would I be looking for here? What would I like about this? Or when I'm watching a movie, even I'll get to a point where I'm like, I'm not crazy about this, and so I'll shut that part down, and then I'll reach in and be like, okay, so what audience is this for? And once I find that, then I know who to recommend it to, and I know how to watch the film from there on out. And that may sound weird to people, but it's just something that I do. I don't truly hate any film I've ever seen because I really think that every film has an audience. How Tension pisses me off because of the fact they ripped off one of my favorite books and gave it no credit. But I kind of, at my old age now, can kind of look at it like Dean did and say, if you love the book, why would you want the movie associated with it anyway, right? Guys, that's all we got for today. Thanks for listening. This one went a little bit longer than usual, but I appreciate you hanging around and listening to the top 10. And we will be going to 2004. We'll try to have that one out day after tomorrow. Guys, we will talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye.